Well, hello, I'm Doug Apple, back with another special interview for you today. It's the time of graduations, and especially here in Tallahassee, of course, where we have Florida State and Florida A&M and Tallahassee State College now, and then all the high schools, of course, and then all over the country, all over the world, really. This is a time of graduation. New people pouring out into the marketplace, young people wondering what they're going to do. There'll be school loans to be paid back, of course. So what advice would you give to this year's crop of college graduates? That comes to my mind because just yesterday, as I'm recording this, I was engaging in a tour coming through the radio station of Florida State students, and I had some advice for them, and we can get into that later. But right now, we're going to talk with Mike Sharman. He's the legal counsel for Share Healthcare. He's up in Virginia. We're here in Florida. And Mike, I know you have a lot of wisdom, a lot of advice. And here's my challenge to you, though. What would you tell this year's crop of college graduates? But I also want you to try to think with two brains. One is your current brain with all of its wisdom and experience, but also with the brain of that 22-ish year old who doesn't have all your wisdom and knowledge. If you can possibly put yourself back into their shoes, what would you tell this year's crop of college graduates?
Doug, you're talking about the script that's in a whole lot of the Hallmark movies of a middle-aged or older person who miraculously gets an opportunity to go back and live as themselves in high school or in college. And what would they do if?
What would they do?
Yeah. So isn't that what we all wish we could do, is have our current knowledge, our current experience, but go back into that youthful body with all of life ahead of us.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you know, there are just some kids that just are more mature and make more mature decisions and just have that they've already learned it, or it was just intuitive in their makeup. You know, I have one granddaughter, Bree, who, you know, she's one of those kids that you just say she's an old soul. She's always been very sober-minded, let's say, very deliberate in what she does, very cautious and careful. I guess I would say that in choosing what she does, but she's very courageous in just moving forward in things. But there are some kids like that, and I'm saying that about her as a 14-year-old. She's going to make wise decisions. That's that.
Wow.
And others that are much more unformed, let's say, right now. And sometimes life has to hammer them into place, and hopefully we can help some of the kids avoid that might be listening today, or their parents or grandparents or older brothers or sisters might hear this and say, hey, let's see if we can find this on replay and find the podcast, and let's listen to that together. So a couple of things I would say is, do live for today, but plan for when you're 70. And that's in all sorts of things, you know, in the job choices that you make, in how you spend, but more how you spend your emotions. You know, don't be impulsive and do impulsive things that you're going to regret, not just tomorrow morning, but in a week, a year, a decade, and in 5 decades. But just thinking of that financially, if we've all heard those financial examples of, well, if you save $100, per month now when you're 21, you'll be a quadrillionaire by the time you're 70. Well, that really kind of is true.
Yeah.
If you plan for and save, you're going to be wealthier at the time that you need to, so that you have all the harvest stored up, let's say, in your elder years, so that you can do the things you want to. But that's true with the education. Now, you mentioned all the different graduate levels of high school, vocational school, community college, PhD candidates. Well, I just want to encourage them, even if they're looking at a student loan, the one thing you can never lose, the one investment that never goes bad, is your education.
Mm.
You permanently have that high school diploma. You permanently have that associate. You permanently have that certificate from whatever vocational school you went to. You permanently have your BA. You permanently have your BS. You permanently have your master's. You permanently have your PhD. You permanently have your nursing degree. You permanently have your MD. You permanently have your DO. Nobody can ever take that away from you. And, here I am an attorney, but I first had to get the GED when I was in the military to be able to get into community college, to be able to get into college, to be able to get into law school, and then get my law school degree so that I could go on and get my post-law school degree that I have. One gets the other, and then I didn't lose anything with every one of those certificates or degrees. Every one of them helped me get to the next place. And every one of them increased my ability to live for today and plan for when I'm 70. Every one of them helped me to enjoy more what I'm doing, because one of the things that education does is it helps you to expand your work cycle. If you're a factory worker, you're doing the same thing repetitively all day, all week, all year, forever, which is why unions exist, really, because that's a hard job to do. Mm-hmm. Henry Ford, when he set up the first really serious assembly line, the firearms manufacturers did it before him, and he kind of copied what they were doing. But he did this assembly line so he could make cars cheap and fast. And he knew that it was hard on the worker. So he paid them double the prevailing rate right then. Because it's hard, and yet he wants to keep those workers because stability in workers is very important. So if anybody wonders, well, how come those factory workers, union workers get so much money? Because it's hard to do repetitive work. And what does education do? It expands the work cycle so that the repeat of that work cycle goes in longer and longer periods of time. And that makes life more exciting. So that's that live for today part. The more education you have, the more interesting and diverse your work is going to be. And then also the more education you have, the easier it is to plan for when you're 70. We hear on financial things too, the living in thirds. A third you save and give. You divide that between saving and giving. A third that you are living on, and then a third is for all the other things that may come up as you are living. So that's one way of doing it. I'm sure, you have financial ones. But the point of that to your college graduates is have a budget. Have some sort of budget. That way you don't impulsively wind up doing things that you're going to regret or that stop you from making good career choices. You might want to take a career or the next job that pays less than other opportunities because you think it might get you farther. For example, my first job out of law school was working for a senator in the U.S. Senate. Well, that paid a lot less than working for a law firm or going out on my own. But one, it was a paycheck, and two, it was really interesting. So there might be people out there who would want to be doing the same thing. They might want to have their first job actually being out on the mission field. But if they have debts and expenses, they haven't planned for it, it'd be harder for them to do it. The only debt I encourage people to take is student loan, because it's actually an investment. But just like any other investment, you want to invest wisely. You don't want to be taking out a large loan to be studying a topic that nobody's going to pay you for, and that even as an entrepreneur, you're not going to be able to make any money in. And there's also just too many ways of getting education for free or for little money that you shouldn't have to have huge student debt. Even if you want to become a doctor, all right, well then take one of the government opportunities to work for the public health service, and then they'll pay you to go to college. Go into the military, they'll pay you to go to med school, etc. But just keep in mind that don't fear education, don't fear the next level of education, because the one thing you can never lose is your education. And then keep in mind 2 Corinthians 9:8. And God is able to make all grace abound toward you, that you, always having all sufficiency in all things, may have an abundance for every good work. every good work. So God's purpose for us is that we do good works. And, we think, well, what is God's work? And, well, Jesus answered his disciples when they asked him that exact question, well, what's God's work? We want to do it. And at John 6:29, Jesus answered and said to them, this is the work of God, that you believe in him whom he sent. Well, that's too simple, Mike. Just believe in God and that's the work? Yes, because if you are believing in him, then you're going to be doing every good work, whatever you're doing, whether it's, you own a hardware store, you work in a hardware store, whether you are the manager, the director of a hospital, or whether you're the one who does the cleaning of the medical utensils in a hospital. It's all good work, whatever you are doing, if you know that you are doing the work of God because you believe on the one whom he sent. And that means if you're doing the work of God, you're infusing everything you do with love, whatever the task is, whatever the skill is. So, Doug, what advice did you give those kids that came true?
Oh, well, my advice to them, and it was not a Christian group or a Christian radio station, but it was not a Christian group of Florida State students coming through. But the next thing I found tumbling out of my mouth was, this is my advice to you, and that is, God has put certain gifts and skills and interests inside of you, of every person. And now I mean, people don't believe in God or whatever. It's still true that everybody's going to recognize, okay, some people have different gifts than other people. But of course, it helps if you know where they came from. And it's interesting from a scriptural perspective that God has distributed gifts. Now, it talks about spiritual gifts in the Bible. I think it applies to all gifts. Some people are good with numbers. Some people are better with words. Some people are good with music. Some people are better at physical skills in a three-dimensional world. We have different skills and abilities. If you don't try to do something that you don't have in you, but you do try to do those things, follow that path where you can already look and say, okay, I think God has gifted me for this, this, and this. That's what I'm going to put my heart and my passion into. What you're going to find is that you're lighting fire that is ready to burn versus trying to light wet wood, for example. If you tried to turn me into a mathematician, you'd be trying to light wet wood. But if you drop me in communications, which is where I am, obviously, then you're lighting a pile of dry leaves. I mean, that fire is going to burn, and that fire has been burning in me. So for all young people, for anybody of any age, if you're retired, look into your heart, look into your experiences, take it to the Lord in prayer. I advise and to say, God, what are these gifts and skills, these opportunities that you've placed before me where that fire burns, the things that you want me to be doing? Because if you can go that direction, then that's going to be good for today. It's going to be good for when you're 70. It's going to be good to your deathbed and on into eternity. I didn't say all of that to them, but that's my advice.
Well, and it's hard sometimes for a younger person. It's hard sometimes for a lot of people, whatever age, to really discern, well, what is my gifting? What would God want me to do? And one question that I ask kids as they're maybe a junior in high school or a junior in college is, well, if you were born a billionaire and you could do anything you want after you finish all that travel and stuff that you say you would do if you were a billionaire, what would you want to do day after day, year after year? What would you want to do if you were a billionaire and you could do anything you want? They normally stumble over it because they've never considered, well, if I could absolutely do whatever I want, what would that be? And like I mentioned, they'll first toss out a couple, frivolous things, traveling, buy my favorite classic car, that type thing. Mm-hmm. But I'll kind of get through that chaff and I'll say, yeah, but after a while that'll get old. You'll hit 25, you'll hit 30, you'll do all those different things. They'll get old after a while. What would you really want to dig your teeth in if you could and you were a billionaire? And then that reveals to themselves what it is they really want to do. Mm-hmm. And that depth of desire that comes out with that, to me, I think reveals, well, what way did God incline them? that train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. Well, I've heard that interpreted as, whichever way that arrow is bent, whatever way that stick is bent, whatever way they are inclining, if you help nurture that when they're young, that's what they're going to be doing when they're older.
Mm-hmm.
And so that heart cry of, well, if I could do anything on earth, this is what I would do. I think that helps define things. And almost always is that kids tell me it's something creative and something that helps other people. And that is what we want them to do. But in all of it, and it doesn't matter whether it's a secular, worldly child we're talking to or a Christian one, Proverbs 14:23 applies. In all labor, there is profit, but idle chatter leads only to poverty. Mm-hmm. So Proverbs 14:23, now in the Message, gets more direct, Message translation. Hard work always pays off. Mere talk puts no bread on the table.
Right.
So many people talk about what they would want to do and talk about it and talk about it and talk about it. And then by the time they're 70, they say, well, what I had always wanted to do was.
Right.
Well, hard work always pays off.
Mm-hmm.
Mere talk puts no bread on the table. But hard work in anything pays off. Hard work in anything pays off.
Mm-hmm.
When I was still a high school dropout and hadn't yet gotten into the military to get my GED, I was carrying bricks for the bricklayers, and I was not happy at it. Did not like it. I put in my time, and et cetera. And one of the bricklayers, who was a Christian, and I wasn't then, he said, well, it doesn't seem like you enjoy what you're doing. I said, well, how much enjoying can I get, shoveling mortar and handing bricks up on this, tall, high building, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And he said, well, just try this for the next hour. Do it the best you can. Push yourself. Do it the best you can, and then see how you feel about it.
Yeah.
And so that's what I did. Instead of carrying one brick in each hand, I carried two, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Just tried to, get the bricks up there as best and neatly as possible. Just tried to do the best. And he was right.
Yeah.
Just that, putting that challenge in it and begin taking pride in what I was doing, but also challenging myself. In all labor, there's profit, but just idle chatter, particularly idle grumbling. Leads only to poverty. And, we just have so many scriptures on that 1 Corinthians 10:31. Therefore, whether you eat or drink or whatever you do all to the glory of God. Colossians 3:17. And whatever you do in word or deed, do all in the name of Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him. The famous one, 2 Timothy 2:15. Be diligent to present yourself approved to God, a worker who does not need to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. Now, all those things seem like we're over-spiritualizing it. But if we're loving God, that means we're loving the people we're working for and that we're working with, and we recognize that there's no menial labor. There's nothing that's insignificant. But the more education that a person can get, whether it's technical knowledge or academic knowledge, the more they're going to be able to benefit those that they work for, and the more they're going to be able to benefit themselves and their family in God's kingdom.
Well, one thing that college graduates will suddenly be facing is probably having to pay for their own health care. So talk about that.
Well, good segue there, Doug. So, as I mentioned, I'm the legal counsel for Share Health Care, and the graduates may have needed to deal with it before. They might have heard their parents talking about it, but Share Healthcare is a healthcare sharing ministry. It's a 501c3 Christian ministry whose specific function is to help Christians who are the members of Share Healthcare share the cost of their medically necessary medical expenses. So as you mentioned, a lot of these graduates might need to be taking on their own responsibility for their health care. Perhaps their parents had them on their health insurance, but perhaps their parents did not have any health insurance. And either way, they're going to be needing to take care of it for themselves. And so for a single, we're $149 per month. For a couple, And May is the graduation month. June's the marriage month, and those combination of months are not, that sequence of months is not a coincidence.
No.
You graduate in May, get married in June.
Yeah.
Get the engagement ring either in the fall semester of your senior year or the engagement ring in spring semester of the junior year. But May you graduate, June you get married. And so a couple is $249 a month. And then when they begin having children and are having a family, we're $349. So $149 for a single per month, $249 for a couple, $349 for a family of four. And we share in, like I said, in all medically necessary medical expenses with that amount that I mentioned, the $149, $249, $349. They would need to have as their own out-of-pocket expense $1,000 for that event or diagnostic course of events, and everything else is shared. We don't have a per event limit. We don't have an annual limit. We don't have a lifetime limit, because this is what it's about, is sharing.
And if people want more information, what do they need to do?
Well, they need to call and speak to somebody on the other end of our phone lines. We'll have an American accent, and we'll have every answer that they are looking for, and that's 844-SHARE-HC, 844-SHARE-HC, or they can look it up on the internet, sharehealthcare.com, sharehealthcare.com.
That's sharehealthcare.com, or the phone number 1-844-SHARE-HC. And we've been sharing with you our advice for this year's crop of college graduates. And I'll remind you all to say a prayer for these graduates, because God hears the prayers. He knows who these graduates are. He knows what they need. He's trying to get through to them all, but he also then uses us to get through to them. So especially if you have any graduates in your own life, make sure this is your reminder. Sometimes I forget myself. This is your reminder. Bring these people to the Lord in prayer. That's Mike Sharman for Share Healthcare, and for Wave 94, I'm Doug Apple.